Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Power to the Flower podcast. My name is Nairobi, and I'm your host. And I'm so excited to be back for episode 10 of season 3. On this episode, we're going to be talking about social consumption in a way that perhaps we haven't really spoken about ever before. I realized as I was doing some looking back at the past episodes, I may have posted about it on Instagram, but I never actually did a dive into social consumption since it passed back in January of 2026 earlier this year. Social consumption in Massachusetts looks much different than social consumption in New York, for example, where in New York they already have something like public consumption. So you can be outside and it feel like you're already consuming publicly anyway and socially. In New York, though, they're having something else called a farmer's market that if you're interested and you're a cannabis business in New York, you might actually want to go ahead and put your business out there. You just have to be a qualifying cannabis business in New York and then have to have the licensing, obviously. You could file over your application with the OCM, who's now accepting applications for this farmer's market style. And it's really cool because it basically is bringing the plant directly to the people in events in public spaces where people just go and maybe they might want to buy some bud, but instead of buying it from the cultivator, even though the cultivators can be there, you'd be buying it from the retailer. So that's just one thing to know. However, in Massachusetts, social consumption looks a little different. Social consumption in Massachusetts passed in January after a lot of debate. Before, it was once a pilot program that it was pitched to be, and now we're actually looking at having our municipalities decide on the final rules for having social consumption in the municipality. It could be a city or a town. They just have to pass the rules and basically outline where people can actually place their businesses. But here is the catch. Nobody is talking about this part. This part right here needs to be amplified because this is what we get into with the murky lines of zoning. That basically distinguishes where you can and cannot operate a business or open up a particular type of business. This all really just determines a lot of the outlines of where people can operate within a city's boundaries and limits. In Massachusetts, we have three different license types when it comes to social consumption. The first one is the supplemental license, and that's given to already existing marijuana establishments. Is also if you are a retail dispensary, anything that is already existing, and this supplemental license type would be an add-on for social consumption to occur within their vicinities. What folks aren't really talking about is the part where you're going to need an HCA even if you already have an existing license type with the city that you're operating in. So let's say there's a Boston marijuana dispensary and they would like to have a supplemental license for social consumption. That means that they would have to then do a new HCA, which is completely an add on to whatever they already have existing. So any marijuana licensed operator would probably have more than one existing HCA if they're looking to do this with social consumption. The second marijuana license type for social consumption is the hospitality license. So this goes for any existing business that is not a cannabis business. So if you do not apply for the supplemental license because you don't already have an existing cannabis business like a dispensary or whatever, well, this one could apply to you, the second one, because the hospitality license is given to businesses that are non marijuana existing companies. So let's say you own a nail salon and you're looking to have cannabis consumption on your property. Well, you can do that, babes. I would love to smoke a joint while getting my nails done. Okay. And that would be an amazing idea if anybody wants to do that. Please make sure to invite me. But you could apply for the hospitality license. So that hospitality license would be applicable to you. You just have to make sure that you're applying again with the city and doing an HCA. And this could also be a partnership with an existing marijuana operator that you end up doing this with. So let's say a cultivator is providing the bud, but you would then collaborate with them in order to have that into your business. So you are now looking at working within the supply chain of the cannabis industry. So now this is for really cool, regular, traditional businesses that want to venture into cannabis. The third license type is the event organizer license. And this one is really cool for my event organizers that like to do things that are non-traditional and maybe just don't want to have an event that's always just based on alcohol. Well, you're in luck, because if you do this event organizer license, you can't actually mix alcohol and tobacco. And as a matter of fact, for any of these license types, there cannot be any tobacco involved. So, that being said, you guys need to be aware, because if you're like me and you like to smoke a blunt, that also means that I can't have my frontos in any of these cannabis businesses. And that means if you are, let's say, a place that already sells frontos and things like that, you can't actually have them there if you're going to be operating under this license type for consumption. You might be able to sell it, but people cannot consume it. Okay. Let's say if you want to do a event that's consumption friendly in Boston, you can have alcohol in the same vicinity being sold where there is marijuana also being consumed. This is just to say it's only joints, babes. Or you could have vapes and edibles and all that other stuff. But as far as like your blunt types, there's no graba. As much as I would love to have some graba, you can't have any graba. I'm sorry. So now that we discussed the three different license types, it's really important to talk about why I'm mentioning this now and not in January. Well, the biggest reason is because the municipalities are now getting closer and closer mid-year to actually establishing their rules for consumption. So this is the part where I want all my social equity folks to tune in, because this applies to us and also to the micro businesses and the craft co-ops and also the economic empowerment applicants that would be able to qualify for this license type. The local municipality is going to be determining where we can and cannot have these businesses. Like if you were that nail salon and you were looking to have a hospitality license, you may not actually be able to qualify. Let's say the city decides to zone for social consumption in only specific areas, but not in the residential mixed use area, which is very possible because there may be places that are already prohibited within the zoning rules that they can't be in. Where some municipalities, and I think pretty much everywhere, you can't have your schools next to a marijuana establishment, which is like where the youth would be, but you may actually have a nail salon that's next to a school. So that's why you might not be able to qualify for this temporary license type. So just make sure that you're aware of this, especially as you're getting into the idea of how this business could look like for you. It might be more probable to have something, let's say, in an industrial area where cannabis has typically been zoned. I know that some folks are already starting to plan, and that's amazing. You should have your business plans together, but you should just be cognizant of the zoning. And in the meantime, here's what I suggest you do: get involved on the local level. Know who your counselors are. Next year, we're coming up on a municipal election. You should also know who the MMA is. The MMA is the Massachusetts Municipal Association. And the MMA usually takes strong stances with the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts that collectively represent their interests. So they're like a lobbying group, if you will. They were typically against social consumption, which you guys should kind of look at their work on that and their letters to the CCC during this whole draft provision process. Because they really came out, and some people were a little bit concerned that the MMA taking the stance might actually be reflective of how the municipalities might overall view social consumption, which technically it could be just a new revenue stream and a new tax opportunity for these municipalities if they seize these opportunities. I know that out in Western Mass, they're typically much more amenable to social consumption, and that is also something to point out. Every region in Massachusetts is going to be a little different depending on how conservative they are and also maybe how open and liberal they might be to marijuana. My concern with this is that the zoning rules may actually stifle some of these small businesses in actually expanding or even getting into social consumption. What I recommend for you is this: go find out who your local mayor or town manager might be. Ask them for a meeting, and then see if you can get in front of the city council as well, just to start these conversations. On the local city council docket, you might want to get some information from the city clerk just to see how you can get in front of your town council or your city council and then get the details from the CCC. What is it that they might need? I leave that charge with you. Just make sure that you're asking the right questions and continuing to stay plugged into this conversation. Until next time, and thank you so much for being with me on episode 10 of season 3. Bye.